A warm good evening to all the participants. I welcome on behalf of ICFAI Online all of you to this 98th leadership conversation. We are extremely happy today to have Mr. Ajit Rangnekar with us. Good evening, sir, and welcome to this conversation. I'm very happy you have given us the time and you have agreed to speak in our leadership series. And today, I'm sure a lot of participants are eager to raise some interesting questions and understand the work that you have been doing as part of RICH. And probably they'll go back even to the work that you have done prior to being part of RICH. Sir, allow me to share my screen. I'll do a brief introduction and then hand it over back to you for your opening remarks. We call it WiseViews Leadership Conversations. And as I said, this is the 98th in the series. This is Innovation for Impact, What Should Telangana Do? And the session is for about 1 hour. Intro and opening remarks followed by our Q&A in 2 clusters and then sum up. Let me share a brief introduction of the leader that we have this evening with us. Mr. Ajit Rangnekar is the Director General of Research and Innovation Circle of Hyderabad, RICH, a Telangana government initiative to take innovation in agriculture, health and sustainability to market. He also runs the Hyderabad chapter of Social Venture Partners, an organization which assists NGOs to scale up their impact. As you all know, he retired as the Dean of Indian School of Business, where too he espoused entrepreneurship and innovation in socially important sectors. He has been a member of many global committees in business education and advises boards of foundations and social ventures. Prior to ISB, he was in Hong Kong for over 20 years. For the first 7 years with KCHK Limited, handling investments and strategy, and then for 14 years with Pricewaterhouse Consulting, handling various roles, including country head, first of Pricewaterhouse, and then of PricewaterhouseCoopers Consulting Practice, and East Asia head of PwC Telecom Practice and Learning and Development. Pretty impressive, sir. Prior to going to Hong Kong, he worked with Associated Cement Companies, ACC in India, in different roles, including OR analyst, financial planning manager, and general manager, Catalyst Plant. He is a graduate of the prestigious IIT Bombay and did his post-graduation in management from, again, a prestigious institution, IIM Ahmedabad. He lives in Hyderabad with his wife and 2 sons in UK. They live in London. Once again, thank you very much, sir, for agreeing to speak with us. I also take one more moment to introduce my colleague, Prof. Prasad. He brings with himself 3 decades of rich experience as an entrepreneur, as a corporate professional, now as an academic. He also is from IIT Bombay. His BTech was from IIT Bombay and PGDM from IIM Kolkata. He published several articles, edited books, and presented papers in conferences. Thank you very much, Professor Prasad, for joining. This is about me, and I'll skip this one.
Thank you.
Sir, now I request you to start your session. We are all eagerly waiting to understand the role and the work and the impact that is created by your organization, and your intervention, your collaboration with the government of Telangana is pretty impressive. We keep reading this on and off, and this is a great opportunity for us to understand from you this crucible, this movement of innovation for impact. Over to you, sir, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudhakar, and thank you for inviting me. 2-3 things before I start. One is, as you can see from the person who is facing you and talking to all of you, they have used a photograph of mine which is probably a decade old, or at least I'm feeling a lot older. So that's one which I apologize for. I should have made sure that a newer, more current photograph gets downloaded. But the second thing, I want all of us to think, very often we listen based on who is speaking. That's why we have the need for introduction, right? And not what is being said. So think for a moment, if that CV was not mine and if I had not done any of those things, would what I'm saying be different? And why should your receptivity to it be different? And I think this is something that all of us need to ponder about. We somehow think that wisdom comes only from some few people. I think that's probably not true. In fact, as a part of my consulting practice, I met a large number of CEOs who were, what shall I say, the antithesis of wisdom. But we'll leave that aside. Second thing is, I always feel very uncomfortable when my introduction is given, because it never covers the many occasions when I have failed. And I promise you, I failed a lot. And certainly both in ISB and at Rich, I think we have had a huge, big list of failures because we have tried new things. And like many new things that you try, things sometimes work, things very often don't work. We don't understand its in truest sense, and therefore we are not able to. And as is true of all of us, we often learn from our mistakes. So a lot of what I'm going to say to you today is from that sense of, I wish I had realized this earlier. Okay. And this is more about me thinking aloud. So I'm not going to make any presentations. I'm not going to give you any data-driven analysis. Okay. And I'm going to speak very, very little about what we did at ISB and somewhat less also about what we do at Rich, because I want us to think about what we should be doing and not what we are doing. Okay. So with that caveat, let me start. And because I told you that it's all about thinking aloud, I'm going to start with a completely unscientific, untested observation. It's purely a personal observation, okay? So I believe that roughly every 40 years, give or take a few here and there, the dominant worldview changes. So what do I mean? See, normally a vast majority of the world has a view which they subscribe to. Doesn't have to be right just because it's a large number, but that's a dominant. Okay. And there is often an opposing view held by a relatively lesser or less powerful group which opposes it. Okay. But it's there. So let's just start. If you look at the 20th century, okay, beginning from 1900 to 1945, roughly 45 years, what was the predominant worldview? It was about colonization, right? All the powerful countries were busy colonizing, and the opposing force against that was the freedom struggle. Please understand that Nazism was not an opposing worldview to the colonization. The Nazis said they were smarter in some ways. They said, okay, let's colonize these countries which are colonizing others. So they went after Germany, France and UK and things like that, right? So there was nothing. They were also colonialing. They also wanted to grab the whole world and control it. And so did the so-called allies. The opposing force was the freedom movements. Then after Second World War, till roughly about 1980, the two opposing forces were the democracies, and to a great extent, that was more like Fabian socialism, but it was fundamentally, developed countries trying to help underdeveloped countries or poor countries as they were then known, or the global south, to grow. And there was communism on the other hand. And those were the two opposing forces. There was for a while the non-aligned movement started by Nehru and Indonesia and a few others, but that really didn't work. Broadly, there were those two. Then from about 1980, the next roughly 40 years, globalization was the dominant view. And all of us followed that, a majority of us followed that, even China, right? And opposing that were not so powerful, but somewhat regional views. For a while in the Middle East, there was extreme Islam, right? Then there were a few pockets of, non-globalization, localization, etc., but there were many other forces. I would submit to you that globalization worldview is very rapidly petering out. Already we are seeing this in the last 2, 3, 4 years, that globalization is no longer the dominant worldview. The world has already begun to see, and the Western world has definitely begun to see, the strong impacts of extreme changes in climate. So US now, you see rivers of rain, you see snows when there were no snow, you see bushfires in Australia, and God forbid, I hope it doesn't happen, but we are likely to see an extreme summer this year, in this month and next. So let's hope that that's not, but we are all across the world, we are now, climate change is no longer something in the future, something that may happen after 30, 40 years, who knows, it is there now. And therefore, the dominant world view is going to be influenced by climate change. Very, very strongly by climate change. Okay. And I don't know what the opposing view to that will be. I guess there will be some countries who will be a little more selfish. I hope they are not, but they are bound to be. And there are bound to be a lot of, to's and fro's about who is responsible, why it's responsible. All the usual foolish things that world leaders do to grab it's like, the whole building is on fire, but I'm trying to protect my room. I mean, it is stupid, right? But it happens. So let's leave that aside. But the point I want to leave with you is that the dominant world view in the next 20 years or so is going to be driven by climate and sustainability. And if that is the predominant worldview, what does it mean to us in Telangana? So when I'll now take you back to a little bit of a journey and history about what happened in ISB and how this whole thing ultimately hangs together. When we started ISB, we had said that we don't want to have departments based on finance, marketing, etc., etc. They must be impact driven. They must be some cost driven. And the first center we started was actually Center for Entrepreneurship. And another center that we started somewhere around 2005, 6, around 6, was Center for Emerging Market Solutions. We said everyone in the West is talking about all their problems. Who's going to talk about us? We must look at us, right? And when we did that, when we started the Center for Entrepreneurship, we joined hands with TAI and Jay Chaudhary and Satish Andhra specifically. And we started the first exposure for entrepreneurs in Hyderabad. Before that, there was practically no formal opportunity for entrepreneurs to come together. And I promise you, the entrepreneurs you see today and the entrepreneurs that we saw in 2004 were completely different, totally different. It was a very, very naive, what I would call as the kindergarten view of entrepreneurship. From there to today, I feel so happy and proud to see the change that has happened. But it was there. Right? And in that time, somewhere around 2006, 7, 8, I began to feel that, many of these entrepreneurs I'd like to make a difference. We were entrepreneurs. We were creating entrepreneurs, but we were not creating innovators. Why do I say that? Because all our entrepreneurs were coming out with things that were already there. So if you have Uber, I'll have Ola. If you have something else, I'll create taxi for sure or something else. If you have Amazon, I'll create whatever it is, we had a few hundred e-commerce vehicles, right? So they were all me too. So at one of those meetings, after we had seen it, I stepped back and said, why don't we have startups which focus on the building blocks of our country? And at that time, in about 2008 or thereabouts, I felt that there were 4 building blocks. One was food, second was health, third was education, and fourth, even at that time, I was a believer in climate and I was talking about sustainability. But I was honestly talking of sustainability from the point of view of water sustainability, ensuring that we as a country do not, run out of the basic things that are needed, etc. I had really not, and I wish I could claim that I was such a great thinker that way back in 2008-9, I had thought of it. No, but I wanted to do those things. Okay. Then I realized to my utter surprise that there are 40 plus national research institutions in Hyderabad alone, and a few more private research institutions. But even those public institutions were all in these, except education. There was nothing in education, but they were in some source kind of sustainability. There were many in health, and there are as many as 17, if I'm not mistaken, in agriculture. Right? So I decided to knock on their doors and say, you know what, tell us what work you're doing so that we can take it to market. And I was thrown out, because the dominant view among the research institutions in those days was, you get out, we are. So at that time, we in ISB presented a paper to the government, I think it was 2010-ish, that this is a national treasure. It's taxpayers' money that these research institutions are doing work in, and we have a right as a taxpayer to exploit it. And that paper was called, Let us create a circle. And the reason we call it a circle was everybody sits at the same table and everybody shares equally, which is very appropriate right now during Ramadan. But our idea was that this is a national treasure which everyone should have equal access. So we called it the Research and Innovation Circle of AP in those days. That subsequently got changed to Research and Innovation Circle of Hyderabad. And that was an idea, right? That we must focus on the building blocks of the country. Much later, what happened was nothing happened, to be honest with you. There were political changes in 2009, and this had just happened in 2010, and the whole concept of Telangana had come to the fore. Political issues had met more, so nothing happened with this, and it remained there where it was till 2014, when the minister K.T. Ramarao took charge, and on the second day came to my office at that time in ISB and said, okay, we've been talking about innovation, let's make it happen. So T-Hub happened first and Rich came next. By that time, we had felt that education was already being taken care of and people are doing, and let us focus on what we now call as One Health. That means having a clean environment, having adequate food, water, etc., and having adequate good health. And that is what Rich predominantly focuses on, right? So we focus on helping startups to market in food and agriculture, in life sciences, and in sustainability. And we do three things. First is, as I said, we work with startups. Second thing is, unlike the digital society, the innovation ecosystem of many of these things is not fully developed. So take, for example, medtech. Many medtech are started by IT people and people who come from the technology side, who don't necessarily have connections to clinicians and hospitals to understand how it actually works. They also have no way for this to be validated. And you certainly cannot. I would hate to have something come into the market that says, I'll tell you whether you got cancer or not. And by the way, I don't know whether it's been tested, but I have done this. So there needs to be very strong validation. And the same is true of agriculture. We simply cannot let some agri-tech technology out into the world, because the poor farmer, we owe it to the poor farmer to assure them that this actually delivers on. So that is broadly what we do. Increasingly, we are doing a lot more work also in sustainability, right? But let me step back from Rich and let's look at what Telangana should or should not. So if we are if my hypothesis is correct, and if we are actually going for the next 20 years to move into an era where sustainability becomes the predominant worldview, what should we do in Telangana? My first submission is we have to shift from innovations for the wealthy to innovations for society. If you look at all our innovations, everything we are doing is for the wealthy. And most of the time it's for business and for high net worth people like you and me. Yeah, I know. Some of you will laugh if I call you high net worth, but let's admit it, we are well-off people, and it is for us. We do very, very little for the real poor. So our innovation focus has to shift for innovation for society. So what, for example? So first is, we as a society, not just Telangana, we as a country and this world, has to ensure that there is strong climate resilience in our food production. If because of the climate change, if because of the unseasonal rains, if because of the extreme heat, we start losing 15–20% of our crops, we are in deep trouble. Deep. There is going to be no, I don't care what our GDP increases if people are going to be hungry and prices of food go high, right? So it is very, very possible unless we develop climate resilience. So by the way, we have documented 25 traditional climate resilient practices, which we have shared with UNDP for all scientists to see. So normally what do we think? We say, oh, we are great scientists, we are great thinkers, so we will tell the farmer what to do. And we are saying, yes, all that is fine, but the farmers also have enormous traditional knowledge and learning, and we better learn from that. And these are all practices which are counterintuitive scientifically. And they have been practiced and practiced successfully by farmers. So 25 such practices we have given, and we'll continue to do. The second thing is water availability. This used to be a city of 300 water bodies. How many have we left? And how many of them are clean? And again, the same thing across the state. We were always water, and of course, we have now done Bhagiratha and so many others to make. But what if there is continuing drought as there was in in California? If you have 4 or 5 years of drought, are you going to have water? How do we sustain and maintain our existing water bodies? How do we stop the the groundwater from being depleted, etc., etc.? So there is enormous amount of work to be done in water and water availability. Again, we have startups in all of these. Third is food supply. How do we ensure that even if there is a climate change, we still produce adequate food? And how do we protect against extreme temperature effect even for human beings? So there is this whole host of innovations that need to be done, and the new ideas and new thinking that has to come, which is purely society-based. Then let's look at industry. Pharma industry is already facing pressure. The people who are buying our products in the US are demanding to know what is our carbon footprint. So we have to move towards green chemistry. We have to move towards ensuring effluent treatment. We have to move towards not letting go of noxious gases in this. So there is an enormous amount of innovation that is going to be required in the pharma industry. In the energy sector, we are already talking of EVs, but honestly, what we are doing right now is only a semblance of EVs. We are really not, there is no innovation in that. We have brought together things, we are putting together things, and we are selling it, right? But when are we going to make new batteries? When are you going to come out with newer and more efficient ways of, having vehicles and power and everything? There are companies like Greenco who are doing amazing work in green power. But going forward, there's going to be potential for obviously nuclear and safe nuclear, but even things like green hydrogen. So again, we are working on green hydrogen valleys and trying to make sure that we test it out in controlled environments so that they can. And the next one is retail sector. The amount of plastic we create is criminal. The amount of waste we create, every day I buy something from Amazon, I feel guilty because the amount of packaging that goes into it is really criminal, right? So how are we going to reuse that plastic? How are we going to get value from that? How are we going to create packaging material which is green, sustainable? So there is an enormous amount of opportunity for us to shift from purely doing things which are, and I'm not saying don't do it, because AR, VR is going to give us enormous opportunity also in terms of education. AI, ML is already giving us a lot of societal benefit. I'm not saying don't do it, but I think we also have to do a lot more, a lot more now for us to be ready for the future. And I'll end by asking you a very fascinating question, which is struggling me. So if each one of us had money to invest in, how do we make investments? We see today, how do we make investment? We look for the highest return. Simple. Not that you actually get it, but at least on paper, you know how to calculate. But tomorrow, we are going to have startups which give you a reasonable return or sometimes negligible return financially, but a huge societal return. And how do we then judge which one to give in? And how do you compare? See, the one great thing in today's world is everything can be brought down to dollars and cents or rupees and paise. So 1 rupee in this is equal to 1 rupee somewhere else. But tomorrow, if somebody says, I'm going to clean up all the water bodies in Hyderabad, versus somebody who says that, I'm going to give vaccines to all the people of Hyderabad, versus somebody who says, I'm going to educate all the children of Hyderabad, in which should I invest and on what basis? So we have, and this is what I feel regret about, that we as educational institutions have failed to figure out how to evaluate this. I think it's already late, but we have to do it and we must do it now. So there is a huge, big agenda in front of us. I'm an incurable optimist. I already see that there are so many startups that we work with who have started work on this. There is still a long way to go. But I think many more of us need to be aware of it. Many more of us need to take an active role of it. Many of us need to also start demanding it of our industry, of our governments, of our civil society, that all of us become part of saving the future of our children. So let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. That is a very different conversation to begin with compared to what we've had over the last several weeks. I particularly like your unique style of narrating a lot of things that you have picked up as part of your journey. It looks like a great story. And at every point, although you have exhorted us that you are thinking loud, but there's a great structure that was part of your entire journey, starting from ISB to till now. Predominantly, you're focused on, I'm sure it is very close to your heart, the climate change and its impact and how do we respond through innovation, through executive action, and through conscientious roles from society as individuals, how do we play? And also the roles played by educational institutions. I think it's a fantastic starting point for us to get into some Q&A now. But I want to thank you, sir. This has been very, very different. So I like it a lot. What I will do now is request Professor Prasad to come in with the first cluster of questions. We are at 7 p.m. So the first cluster of questions will be taken up by Professor Prasad. And before that, I want to welcome our distinguished advisor, Professor Mahendra Reddy, who has joined. I have seen a couple of them joining from US as well. and many other distinguished leaders who are there, whose names I can make out. So thank you very much, sir. Most welcome. I request Professor Prasad to start.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Thank you, sir, for setting an agenda and looking at a direction where all of us can work towards over a period of time. I think the critical aspects on which we would like to develop the questions so that we understand this entire terrain a bit more, and particularly about Rich, because Rich is making an attempt in that direction, is that the research institutions in India and how one wants to take away from them. That is one angle. The other angle is what the discourse is about and where the opportunity lies. And the third is, how do you go about doing all this, which is what Rich is attempting to do. So since there is a cultural difference in where we are coming from, the research institutions, the emphasis on still on economics by a large number of organizations, institutions, and the agenda that we have set ourselves. So we'd like to understand a bit more about the trials that Rich has been making and the issues and concerns that you see and what you think we should do about it. So the questions are targeted in that direction in the first cluster. I'll start with the association of Rich as being the Telangana cluster for the principal scientific advisor. And here there are three objectives which are listed. So we just want to understand those objectives and how that has been chosen. So, I mean, they seem to be very specific. India's national and global science and technology competitiveness, regional solution providers for local industry and government, and shared S&D ecosystem. So, given what you have said, sir, how is Rich moving in the direction of enabling this aspect of the PSA?
So you know, I mean, sometimes we do expect a lot, and you know, that's practically at one level. I can say everything, anything and everything I can do, I can find some place in those things to do it. But I think let me take very specific examples. You know, so when COVID hit in March, April 2020, there was not a single national entity which could produce RT-PCR kits. All the RT-PCR kits were imported. Within a matter of about 3 months, by August, I think, all the clusters working together with startups got the startups up to speed. So institutions like CCMB, CCamp in Bangalore, National Chemical Laboratories in Pune, and other institutions, all of us just came together. We said, okay, let's find out, first of all, who are the startups which are working, where are they, what more do they need to do? And, you know, ICMR, etc., where were the poor startups in these different places? Where was ICMR? There was one startup in Ahmedabad, one in Hyderabad, one in Pune, and one I keep forgetting it. In a matter of about 3 months, we got the government to approve those RT-PCR kits for use. So all of a sudden now you had a national supply. Number two, then we realized that while we had that national supplies, all the ingredients were coming from abroad. So over the next 9 months or so, we worked with those startups and some 70 odd biotech companies across the country to upgrade the quality of the product that those biotech companies were making, to upgrade the capability to produce those reagents, etc. So by about 21 April, May, the country was fully self-sufficient and ready to export RT-PCR. So that's one example of how national, global, and local all came together, right? Then the next big question that we took up was, and this again, you know, sometimes what happens is some of us are passionate about it, we talk about it, and we find things to do. So the next big thing we took up was malnutrition, especially amongst women and children in the tribal communities. And how can we, now we can go and give them iron tablets and some other tablets and something and do it. but how do we adapt their own agricultural practices and cooking practices so that they get more nutrition food and do it in such a way that it is self-sustaining. That means it's profitable enough for them to do it long. So those are another kind. The third kind of things was in agriculture. There had till about 20, thereabouts, there were very, very little ag-tech being actually used. And we looked at about 300 and something ag-techs across the country, shortlisted it down to 76 or 86, I think, ag-techs which we felt were ready to be tested. And for the last 2 years, in the state, we've been testing those on the ground together with the State Agriculture University, PJTSAU. Because you can't just let some startup into. Now, once we do that, then we would sit with the government and say, look, this is proven. Now, please use your machinery to take it to. Right? So there are many different things that we do in order to ensure. Then the last thing was medtech startups, as I said. Medtech startups come, but don't really know how to get it tested. So we have now got a consortium of 17 hospitals with whom we get it tested. So you have to keep trying to do, in some cases there are projects, in some cases there are just things that need to be done on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes there are crises. So we do it. But there are many ways in, for example, I think that we could have done a lot more because you alluded to it, right? We could have done a lot more. As you rightly said, the culture of research institutions is different from the culture of industries, different from the culture of startups. And therefore, one of our biggest roles is to get those three to talk to each other.
Excellent, sir. I think you've given a fairly wide spectrum of examples. You also outlined it fairly well. They cover some of the questions that we do have. At the same time, you have, it looks very much like how a consultant would do it. I mean, it's very, very specific. Each of these innovations which have been mentioned are very specific, and they have solved a particular problem at that point in time, or perhaps a heading in the direction of a solution in some of those cases, but they're very specific. And I think there is some kind of beauty in that which has abridged or let people come together and solve it. Something is there which needs to be understood a bit more in each of these initiatives. Thank you very much, sir, for that. The next question is a little more Telangana specific, and it can be extrapolated to the others. Does a region or a place have its influence or innovation? If so, how do you exemplify it? I mean, how do you get down to the right set of problems?
Yeah, first of all, different places. So, what is required, right? Typically, for a problem to be solved, you need intellectual capital. So either academic institutions or research institutions. You need what I would call as innovation capital. That means startups, people who are willing to take risks, entrepreneurs, etc. Typically, you need an industry, because if there is no industry there, then who the hell is going to actually implement it? But more important than all of that, very often, is you need a highly supportive government. And, I don't know whether this is the secret or not, but I have a tendency to open my mouth and say it anyway. Some 100+ IAS officers from across the country are coming to Telangana next month to study our innovation ecosystem. So it is nationally recognized that when it came to innovation, we have got an innovation policy, we have got an ag-tech policy, we have got data policies, we have got. In every case, the government has been very, and the government's philosophy has been very simple. When KTR Garu came to ISB on the second day of taking charge, I had never expected a government minister to be that far. I'm not exactly a government guy, I'd like to stay away from governments, but he said, look, our USP is going to be innovation. Second thing is our USP is going to be inclusive innovation. So all sectors of the society, not just the educated people, everyone must, farmers must benefit, rural women must benefit, children must benefit. And the third, which is what we had a long discussion in my office, the third we said is, we as governments, our responsibility is to provide the infrastructure only. Then after, it's up to the citizens to use it. So to come back therefore to what you said, I can be a government and I can provide. But if my citizenry is not entrepreneurial, so then we started a whole lot of courses in entrepreneurship for college students, etc., etc., etc. But I think there is a lot of stuff that is gone. And similarly, in the choice of things we are doing, why did we take life sciences? Because this is a very strong center of pharmacy. And also, by the way, of hospitals, tertiary hospitals. So therefore, we have to work. Life sciences is somewhere where we have research institutions, we have academic institutions, and we have industry. Right? Similarly, the seed industry, 2/3 of this country's seed industry comes out of this city. So agriculture is naturally something. Sustainability we took up because we said, oh my God, if we don't do it, we are in trouble anyway. And again, please remember, this state was deficient in water. We've had a long history for which it is. So you choose these things based on what is relevant to you.
Excellent, sir. So choice is the center point, given the resources which are there around us.
All those things have to come together.
Yes.
When they come together, that way we have been fortunate that we have a humongous young entrepreneurial community.
Just a supplementary on that, sir, because it's a vital component and you have highlighted it as one of the most important things. What is it about the government and the support that the government needs to give? What would you highlight in that? If you need to put up, some sort of a framework there for maybe somebody else to adopt, what would you say?
So as I said, provide the infrastructure. And the government has actually stayed out very consciously. See, there are now 9 institutions of Telangana government which are in innovation ecosystem. Sometimes I'm not sure whether I'll get all of them, but I'll try. T-Hub was first, then was RICH, then V-Hub for women, TSIC, which focuses on rural and social innovation and on students, which will get spun off later. Part of it will get spun off as Youth Hub. Then Task, which provides people. T-Works, which is the biggest tinkering shop and I don't remember the exact, not impact, the image, which is for entertainment and gaming and things like that. Then additive manufacturing and emerging technologies, right? So 9 different entities have been created by the state to help in all those different sectors. But except maybe one, which is the emerging market, even in emerging markets, the heads of all of these are people taken from the private sector. None of us is a bureaucrat. On board of each one of these companies, there is only one government employee, one. And I know Jayesh Ranjan pestered me because I was being lazy about adding. He said, no, please add private, please get people from the industry, please, I don't want to be, initially it was just him and me. He said, no, please, this is not good. So the government's philosophy is to create the infrastructure and then get out of it and be supportive. So the reality is that between, and I'm going to sound like a government spokesman, which I'm not, but the reality is that all of us can rely on Jayesh and KTR Garu for help. Saying, look, I need this, or can you connect me to something? And then on top of that, proactively, when he goes to WF or wherever, they market. There is an enormous amount of if you see what is people who have come to TU have been the last week or so, delegations from Croatia, Armenia, some African countries, why do they come to us? They don't go anywhere else because the state has been marketed very well. So there is a lot that the government can do and should do, but the government is very, very clear that it will then step out. It will not start interfering. So nobody tells us whom to recruit, whom to give funds to, whom to do anything. That's entirely our prerogative. And I think that is tough in India today, sadly.
I think, again, the dimensions are extremely clear. You mentioned it, infrastructure, whether it's soft or hard. And then, taking the key members from the private sector, getting out of the way after that, marketing it in the relevant forums and being supportive when there is a need. I think very critical dimensions. And I mean, it's like textbook like, and it's being done. Thank you, sir. Many of the questions are covered. I'll pick up one which, we'd like to understand a bit more. There was, there was mention in the report about industry-facing centers of excellence, so that there is some kind of some mechanism by which you can collaborate with industry, between industry and research institution. And there was also mention about a center of excellence for e-waste in CMET in Hyderabad. You can take any one, sir. And can you give us a glimpse of how this actually builds up that sort of a collaboration, or at least goes in that direction?
Yeah, so there are many. I'm glad you spoke about CMET because I'm very passionate about it. CMET has developed a technology for extracting the valuable metals from the e-waste of our phones and calculators, from PCB waste basically, and then extracting, because as the need for computer components increases, we are not going to do mining. So a lot of what is called urban mining, that means extracting it back. So CMET has done that. So we worked with both the emerging technology wing of the government of Telangana, plus we worked. They wanted to create a center of excellence in which the 20% of the funding was to come from industry, 40% from the state, and 40% from IT in central government. So we at RICH worked with CMET and got them the full 20% funding from Greenco. And not only that, we said, look, it cannot be for just this, because tomorrow the e-waste is going to come from solar panels. Day after tomorrow, it's going to come from batteries and from magnets and for everything that is being used in these electric vehicles. So we better start worrying about those and preparing the technology for those today. So the centers of excellence, that's how they work typically with central government, state government, and private sector funding. We are building yet another center of excellence, this time for green hydrogen, with two frontline research institutions, IICT and IIT Hyderabad. Okay, we have got a large consortium of industry from fertilizer industry, glass industry, big users, to we are now talking to the state transport that can be convert trucks to green hydrogen, etc., etc. There are so many aspects of it, but unless we bring everyone together, manufacturers, users, people who supply equipment, right? People who do research in it, because hydrogen means we are all worried about inflammability, this, that, and the other. So centers of excellence allow us to bring. Now, somebody has to sit in the middle of that and pull people from here, pull people from there. That's what we do. Collaboration does not just happen. Collaboration has to be almost twisted sometimes, because people don't, everyone is busy with their work, right? Somebody has to think of all of those. And that is precisely what we do in terms of center of excellence.
Fantastic, sir. Now that there have been a number of initiatives and the Center of Excellence initiative also, which has been discussed, this is the last question in the cluster. What do you think needs to be done? I mean, collaboration, you put it as a center point in a way that, there are so many stakeholders, and how do you get them to work together? What do you think needs to be done to take this maybe 5 times the speed, 10 times the speed over the period of time, whatever is actually practical? What do you think needs to be done?
I think we need to find better ways of convincing the various stakeholders, especially when it comes to climate. And I mentioned this in passing, societal benefits, we have not found a way of putting it into our profit and loss. Neither societal cost, not. So I can use all the water in this country and it doesn't go on my profit and loss at all. I can save the environment a lot, that also doesn't go on my profit and loss. And therefore, my traditional incentive systems are not in sync with these kind of activities. And I don't have an answer to how to do it. I mean, right now we convince people and most people get convinced, and sometimes there is political pressure from, from the US, for example, you say, unless you can tell us what your green footprint is, etc. But those are, they are slow and they're not. I haven't yet figured out. We go with the passion, we go with that commitment, but everyone doesn't share in that passion. And I don't know what's going to make it, to be honest.
Thank you, sir. A very honest and pragmatical answer. And I think very much there, considering the enormity of the task and the, the kind of agenda that you've defined and where we are right now and what drives the driving forces currently. I think that has helped us understand that kind of a situation a little better. Thank you very much, sir. I hand it back to Professor Rao.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. It's a very interesting conversation, as I always said in the beginning also. I think several points that we have discussed just now requires additional time in terms of explaining it and trying to sensitize people, not just around the screen, but also those who are going to follow these conversations subsequently about the need to focus on sustainability, the need to integrate everything through collaboration and active work on the ground in terms of putting everything together as a centerpiece. So thank you so much, sir. We have a few more questions, and these questions are basically in the application-oriented kind of insights that we can probably take from you. In the meantime, I also request the participants, if they have any questions to ask, we'll open the mics for you, but please raise the hand and we'll take it forward. Before that, my first question is about the fact that REACH provides market entry support for global firms. This is what we have read. Kindly illustrate any one example or one company where that has been attempted, and what have been what you have discovered as some gaps in the ecosystem and how these hurdles were actually surpassed.
So both the state and at the central level, Startup India, right? I'm sorry, not just Startup India, but what's that called? I keep forgetting this. We are keen to get global capabilities into our country, all of us, right? So what happens is, traditionally the governments and states work with the big boys, the big companies. I mean, I don't need to go to a Foxconn, I don't need to go to a Microsoft, I don't need to go to a Novartis, right? But there is an increasing number of next tier and startup industries. For them, see, if you look at India's role, we have a fascinating role. If you take that, some of them have outstanding technologies, and take countries like Germany, Japan, UK, Israel, and Australia, 5 countries that we are currently working with. We also did some work with other countries, but leave those. All of them claim to have great technology, but we have a huge, big market sitting in this country. And you cannot just fly in and implement that technology here. Somebody needs to understand its adaptability and its use, applicability into, somebody needs. So what we do is we marry these kind of companies with Indian counterparts. We help them to understand the regulatory framework in India. We help them to understand the approval framework in India, and we ease their entry into market. We work with Japan, we work with Germany, we work with UK, Australia is now, and Israel. I have not checked with any of those companies whether I can specifically mention their names, but these are good companies, reputed companies. See, the other thing also, there is, whether we like it or not, there is this feeling that, doing business in India is chaotic, it's very difficult, it's bureaucratic. So another thing that we are trying to do is to show to them, no, it's not. That it's easy to do business with Indians, and we bend over backwards. So one really good Japanese company, very respected, that it's not huge, but it's very respected, 100+ years old company, told us the other day, you know what? We used to think that we Japanese are fast, but you people are even faster than us. That is, all those are, so we are also representatives of our country. And when we bring these people, when they come, it brings in capital, it creates employment for us. It is also an indirect implementation of new technology comes them, and we work with those. So there is a lot that is happening. I think it can be a lot more.
Agreed, sir. There's a lot happening on the benefits of bringing these global or technologically advanced countries to work with India, given the fact that we have a very huge market. The role played by Rich is very good. Are there any top of the mind barriers that we have? I'm sure we are now trying to understand that the ease of doing business is much better here. Ease of entry is also not very difficult. We are good people to work with, or easy people to work with. But what are for the benefit of participants, what are the top of mind hurdles or gaps that we need to work on?
See, we need a counterpart agency in those countries. So we have, fortunately, some of those in. That's why, I mean, the reason why we've been able to make this is because there are some counterpart agencies in those countries with whom we are able to work. So if there is no rich equivalent company there, I have no way of reaching out to middle-sized and small-sized innovative companies. So that is the one big constraint that we face. And then, yes, there are those big companies may or may not understand our culture. We may not understand. Some of them need, there is surprisingly a fairly limited understanding about India once you go down from the top. In the second tier, and so there are many. But what we are hoping is that once we can show 5, 10, 15, 20, then some word of mouth will go in those countries. Their governments will be interested. Let's see. But I don't know. I mean, it's still somewhat early for me to say I know the answers to their problems.
Absolutely. Based on the track record of entry support that we provide through organizations like Rich, I'm sure the word of mouth spreads, and then many more would love to come to work with India. Sir, in your experience, how would you say the innovation is ahead when it comes to rural India compared to urban India?
There are many. The Honeybee network has been around for forever. As an alum, I obviously feel good about it. But it has not translated into economic benefits. So, is there innovation? Yes, because necessity creates innovation. Is there successful entrepreneurship from it? Probably not. We were also highly innovative in our this thing, because when you don't have anything, you have to be innovative. And people are. That's how people survive through all those innovations. But we haven't really succeeded in converting those into economic benefits.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's a very pertinent point. I think based on necessity, there are various instances of innovating witnessed in rural India, but we don't have an ecosystem to convert or translate that into economic benefits. Thank you, sir.
Now in the state, we are trying to set up 5 centers across the state to try and reach out. And TSIC's role, one of TSIC's role is practically that, is to go into the rural parts to get people to. But, again, you have to make the whole state machinery. And the state machinery has so many other priorities. I mean, they have to get the agriculture produce out, they have to make law and order, they have to get. So, the thing is that I think all of us are facing far too many challenges, and how we find priorities in all of that is going to be be a challenge going forward.
Great, sir. Yes. So one more question. I think this is often raised, but not understood in that measure very well. Who is actually driving the innovation? Industry or academia or research institutions? The associated question is, how can academia industry linkage be improved in view of rapid technological advancements?
No, so neither of them. I think it's individuals. I think young individuals with fire in their belly are the innovators. All that the rest of us are doing is providing them the infrastructure and the support, and sometimes actually coming in their way. Academia by and large has been the most resistant to change.
Most difficult to change.
Resistant.
Yeah.
And, many years ago, we started the technology entrepreneurship program at ISB. And honestly, in the first few years, it's the faculty which was the biggest problem, not the young students. The young students came out with some amazing real products. This fellow, what's his name? Oh God, Kaustubh Kaundinya came out with that, what is it called? Jasra? I keep forgetting. But he came out with an air-conditioned helmet, which today is being used by construction workers in Saudi Arabia, Middle East, etc. All came from the rural thing. But how much did they? I don't think we taught them, yes. We gave them the new, but our academic institutions, the reason I'm smiling is that for the last 10, 15 years, I've been part of either CII or FICCI's industry academic interactions. I don't think we have done much. Honestly, I think we should do a lot more than we have done. People have taken it upon themselves, and what we have done is because DST, DBT, Niti Aayog has thrown a lot of money at all education institutes to help us to start incubators. So there's at least a platform for people. But how many education institutions can give market access? How many of them actually know what it is to manufacture something? How many of them actually know how to price something? Very, very little. So our incubators to a great extent have been places for people to work. They have not really been incubators in the true sense of the term.
Amazing. This is a pretty heavy point, actually. On one hand, we can be happy that a lot of young students and individuals with fire in their belly are coming up with innovations. And of course, the ecosystem is in a way kind of supporting it, or probably acting as if they're supporting. But the other more serious issue on the flip side is the lack of enough fire or initiative on behalf of institutions, academia, so to say. And there's a very pertinent point that you made, that academia is most resistant to change. I mean, that's where we thought everything begins. That's where we thought that the epicenter of all innovation and change and all this thinking happens in various institutions that are the best in the country. But as you identified, they know too little, or they have access too little to market, and providing the necessary support has been found wanting from this academia and institutions.
See, we have to also be fair to them. For the last 70 years, we've been rating them on their teaching, to some extent on their publications. And in academia, I also include the national research institutions, because to some extent they're part of the same thing. Okay. Now, all of a sudden, we are telling them, you know what, you better move to translational research. If you have a 60-year-old professor who's been doing something for the last 30, 35 years, it's not all that easy for me. Now, the top institutions have pivoted. Right? If you see the extent of innovation that's being supported by the IITs, IIMs, ISB, I know because I helped them. In fact, this morning we had a session there. So the big boys have got it. By the way, University of Hyderabad, another institution is doing really good work in prime. But they are such a small, minuscule portion of our environment. And they're anyway, catering to the brightest and the best. The truth is that there is really no data to say that only the brightest and the best are innovators. Absolutely no data to say that. There is innovation capability in students across, and those students across the world are not getting the kind of support they should get. I think it's still a lot more than what it should be. CSIR, for example, now, if institution sells technology, then some 16% of that money goes to the principal scientist, 10% goes to their team, etc., etc. So the government has done, but you can't change mindset over. So what is going to happen with even these institutions? By the way, Triple IT and IIT Hyderabad are the two institutions which are doing a lot of really good work. But in all of these, the younger faculty is what's going to make the change, and that change will take another 5-10 years before it comes. So I continue to be an optimist, but I don't think we are anywhere right now. We are not there. We have made. I'll also say that we made a lot of progress in the last 5-7 years. 7-10 years ago, there was no startup community. I mean, look at every single college has now got an incubator. So I think we have built the infrastructure. Now we have to build the intellectual infrastructure on top of that. And that will take time. It will take time.
Yes, we have built the infrastructure, but we have now built the intellectual infrastructure. Just sharpening from there, what do you think specifically? What kind of innovation should these engineering and business schools bring in?
So this is something that I've been thinking a lot about and arguing also. We should not make the mistake of expecting each engineering school or business school to create unicorns or big companies. To me, an enormous role of this is actually hands-on education. So the incubator is really a part of the education program where students learn, they understand what are the challenges, and if they fail, so be it. I really don't care. 5 years later, 10 years later, when they are working somewhere, that experience, that knowledge is going to be useful for them when they come out with an idea. So I think that is one thing. Second thing is, if we start focusing too much on result orientation and show me the dollars, then none of us is going to support ideas to POC stage. Technology readiness level of 1, 2, 3 will get ignored. Everyone will start focusing on 7, 8, 9, and there'll be no pipeline. So I think we as a nation have to stand back and figure out what is the role of education institutions in the innovation ecosystem. I believe it is to nurture ideas. I believe it is to give them a testing ground. And that is the predominant thing. That is not what seems to be clear. There needs to be a national dialogue on this.
There needs to be a national dialogue on this. Thank you very much, sir, for that point. The education institution should primarily nurture ideas, build the pipeline for innovative ideas, not just be mercilessly be focused on the results, which should be a testing ground with this education that is deep-rooted in practicum education, hands-on, as you mentioned. It should be part of the incubators and all should be part of the education itself. Thank you, sir. I'm requesting the members to raise their hand in case they have any question, and I'll take one in the meantime. This is a pretty interesting conversation that we are having, and the person who has been handling this as part of Rich is with us. So if you have questions, you can ask. So there is one which has come from one of the participants and it is already with us. That question is, how to encourage jugaads for sponsorships? I think this one of the participants wanted to understand.
How to, so does he say that jugaad should be sponsored? Is that what he means? Yeah. So again, jugaad is see, it's like this. If I, as a big institution, do it, it's research. If you, as a common man, do it, then it's jugaad. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that classification. I think a quick fix is a very important and necessary component of any innovation. And somebody converts a motorcycle into something that sows seeds and this thing. I like, God, this is not jugaad, this is innovation, and this is true innovation. Because it solves, to me, any innovation that solves a real problem is innovation. Any change that solves it. I don't see why it should be called a jugaad. The problem is, when you're now talking about sponsorship, is there a big enough market? Can it be? So, just think that if you are a big company and somebody did something, you're going to say, okay, I've seen him do it there. How replicable is it? Do I have an IP for? So when all those things come in, those people are not equipped to deal with it. So, and I think, this is what Honeybee tried to do. Honeybee Network tried to do precisely this, to see if we could provide. And with all due respects, I don't think it's been a huge commercial success. So I don't have an answer to that.
No, these are amazing discussion points. These discussion points are so interesting because we don't have to have clear answers, but the classification or the viewpoints that you have shared with us, if a big institution does, it is innovation, and if it's a normal common man does, it's jugaad. I know that perspective is extremely important to actually concede the deserving honor for the quick fix solution, which is part of the value chain of innovation. So amazing. Yes, that's a very important point. Sir, what is your suggestion? What is your view on getting the VCs interested towards innovation or innovative ideas and concepts and solutions?
I don't know if there is a shortage of money for VCs. I think there is a shortage of great ideas. And there is a shortage of my ability to tell you how good my idea is. So Satish Andhra of India, long ago, I was sitting with Satish, and I have an enormous respect for him. He's a very, very good thinker. So I enjoyed talking to him. And I said, Satish, what do you look for in a startup? What do you look for in the thing? And one of the things he said, which amused me, was he must be a great storyteller. And when now, after he's spoken, I look at every startup, and today we evaluated 4 startups. We are poor at telling our story, by and large. So if I was an incubator, I would focus not on improving the product, but getting the startup founders to tell their story. See, Shark Tank prepares them, we are beginning to see some of those things happen. But if you take day to day, how few of our people are able to tell their story succinctly and in a way that the VC should want to invest in me. I should not be begging the VC for it. And that's not happening. I'm not able to convince the VC, look, why would the VC not invest? The VC wants to make money, right? But if I don't tell her how good I am, it's my fault. VCs do not owe us money. We owe it to ourselves to tell our story.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think what you're making as a point here is that the ability to convince the VCs to see money in our innovation, number one, which is the greatest need, which is required much more now. The second is, it is a means or it's a tool, the ability to tell your story so convincingly. The storytelling abilities that often incubators should help the startups, or the mentors that help the startups should actually lead towards getting it. VCs are in the business of investing money. While they don't owe it to us, it is our responsibility to get them look at our idea and our innovation. So very nice. It gives a lot of responsibility, action points. One last question I have, and then I will see if anybody else would like to ask a question, and we can end after that, sir. This is about how do we promote women's innovation for economic impact? Any views on this, sir?
Not just for economic impact, way back in 2004, I think, at one industry forum, which I shall not name, they were complaining that there was going to be a shortage of 520,000 professionals. I said, that's because you take engineers, and in the engineering colleges, you only have 10% women. So 45% of this country's population is being ignored. And we have, as a nation, systematically ignored the talent pool of women in our country. Systematically. You know, woman, let her go to history, or the thing, boy, you must go to engineering. I think that's rubbish. And that's short-sighted, because there is now that talent pool has capabilities which are complementary to what many men have, and therefore we need to bring them in. When it comes to agriculture, etc., a large number of people who work actually in the field are women. And therefore in sustainable, by the way, we also see a lot more women entrepreneurs in the sustainability space, which sometimes exasperates people. I say, why are men not here? And why are women only in this? So I think we need to encourage women more and more, and VHub is supposed to do that. But again, beyond VHub, I think we don't necessarily, rest of us do not necessarily, at least I don't think enough is being done to encourage and support women.
Yes, sir. A lot needs to be done on this aspect of promoting women's entrepreneurship and innovation. It is not just for economic impact, it's also for societal impact, as you have explained just now. You see more women in the sustainability space. I think all the more reason for us to encourage, create an ecosystem that actually promotes and encourages women to come in a big number. I think gone are the days where women used to go to engineering colleges in less numbers. Nowadays, the number is going up. For example, in large number of engineering colleges, the number is 30% or more. In Osmania University College of Engineering, I am told that it is as high as 60% women compared to men in the class. So I think slowly the number is going up, and the subsequent touch points in the value chain is where we need to work on and encourage them to move forward, and move forward in terms of innovation, their application to entrepreneurship and things like that. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. There is one question that is appearing in the Q&A box, and that is, are there any plans by the innovation agencies of Telangana government to establish district-wise industry plans at MSME level that are utilizing the local natural resources available in each district?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, does the state have plans to expand the industry base? Yes. But I'm not, I run a not-for-profit company, and I'm not technically a part of the government, so I cannot speak on behalf of the government. But as a citizen who is interested, is the state keen to? So the state is producing industrial parks in different parts. So there are textile parks being produced. There is recently that mega textile park was announced. There are industrial parks in all. So is there a desire in the state for distributing this thing? Absolutely. But exactly what, I've not paid attention to it, to be honest with you.
Fair enough, sir. I think we have taken a lot more time from you than we have originally asked for. Now the time is around 7:51 p.m. I think 21 minutes extra we have taken. So thank you so much for patiently responding to all these queries. But these queries are extremely important for us in terms of understanding what's happening here. As you rightly said, today's session can be labeled as a loud thinking session with you heading and leading the discussion here. I think we touched upon several aspects of roles played by government, roles played by society, individuals, educational institutions, incubators, so on and so forth. I think we have learned quite a bit, but I'm going back to the original point when I started to understand your opening remarks, that in a very unique storytelling style, you have explained to us your journey, and then and very succinctly you have put the dominant worldview that is changing every 40 years, starting from colonization versus decolonization, then to democracies, and then to globalization. And now what we are trying to grapple with is the climate change and its impact on our economy and society and human life and plant life. I think that's a very, very impressive way of bringing us into the most important focus area that you brought us, sir. And the necessity that we are in our own busy schedules, we are trying to create more entrepreneurs than innovators. And that is what you have noticed as an important point when you took charge, both in your roles at ISB as well as subsequently. And you kept on focusing on your contribution to the thinking and the processes in the area of climate change and its impact. So thank you so much, sir. I think we have captured your views very well. Your style, I am personally aware of. Your style is to just talk, and irrespective of who is listening, in terms of not trying to be politically correct, but you will be always sharp, that you have always been, including today, on several aspects. What the governments are actually trying to do, the optimist in you has explained to us the plans that you were privy to, and most of us are now fully aware of what government of Telangana is doing. But as a person who's involved in several circles of discussion, several committees, and making these plans right from the beginning, say 2014 onwards till now, I think you have given us a ringside view of the initiatives that are going towards developing this state, and also what is required for the country in terms of innovation, in terms of entrepreneurship, sustainability. And major focus areas have been those areas which are not to be measured merely by monetary return of investment, but it should be societal impact. I mean, that has been the larger point that you have driven home today. So thank you so much for your time, expertise, and your patience in spending this evening with us, sir. Thank you so much. Professor Prasad, you have any concluding remark? And otherwise we can close it.
I think it's been an excellent session, and sir in his own way has made it visionary. Compared to many of the other sessions that we had, and there's huge opportunity for those who want to get into it. I mean, it depends on us to show the initiative and see in what way we can participate.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. Actually, I think going forward, these question and answer sessions become more enjoyable.
Exactly.
It's what to talk about. So this is great. I enjoyed the format. It was good to be at the receiving end of questions rather than asking questions as one used to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. So ladies and gentlemen, friends who have joined, I want to tell you, this is great. The question and answer sessions format is a very interesting format, as mentioned by Mr. Ajit Rangnekar. Do join in every Friday at 6:30 p.m. We call it IST, but it is ICFAI standard time, 6:30 p.m. on Fridays. Come back for listening to leaders and learning from them and interacting with them. You have a great opportunity of interacting with all these amazing leaders. So see you next Friday on 7th of April at 6:30 p.m. Till then, read more about Rich, read more about what's happening in Telangana on innovation, entrepreneurship, and societal impact. We must all thank Mr. Ajit Rangnekar for his valuable time. Thank you, sir, once again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
And have a great weekend. Thank you.